Over the next 6 years, we will rebuild 150,000 miles of our roads, enough to circle the world 6 times. We will lay and maintain 4,000 miles of our railways, enough to stretch from coast to coast. And we will restore 150 miles of runways and advance a next-generation air traffic control system that reduces delays for the American people. This plan will be fully paid for. It will not add to our deficit over time, and we are going to work with Congress to see to that.
Work with Congress. Here's the thing about infrastructure. Oftentimes when you talk about it, it doesn't look like normal politics. For example, today in the Rose Garden with the Democratic president, there was the Transportation Secretary, Ray LaHood, a Republican and a former congressman. Also, 2 former transportation secretaries, Sam Skinner, there on the left behind the president. He served under George H.W. Bush. He's a Republican. Also, Norm Mineta, who served President Clinton and President George W. Bush. He is a Democrat. I repeat, a Democrat who served in the cabinet of the George W. Bush administration. Infrastructure is so bipartisan, it's not even bipartisan. It's not even nonpartisan. It's like partisan. and it often looks like that. We have often had cross-party transportation secretaries, Democrats serving Republicans, Republicans serving Democrats. It's because infrastructure, particularly transportation infrastructure, has been one issue that both sides have, in the big picture, sort of agreed on. Even as recently as the very partisan fight over the stimulus, many Republicans argued we need more infrastructure.
We do need more money on infrastructure spending. We need more on the infrastructure. We need more on the infrastructure.
There's 7% of this on infrastructure out of $825 billion. We have an opportunity to double the amount of infrastructure money.
We had an $825 billion bill. About $90 billion was for infrastructure. This was not a stimulus bill. Just a tiny portion of it was.
We can disagree on other things, but Democrats and Republicans can get together and say, if there's one thing we agree on with the spending package, it is for simple infrastructure.
That was last year. Republicans arguing for infrastructure spending. Infrastructure, roads and bridges and air transportation and the electrical grid and communications. This used to be the one issue on which you could not discern party, at least from a distance. You couldn't discern partisan differences. Now it is just another way to highlight how the parties are different. The president wants a $50 billion paid-for, not deficit-funded infrastructure investment. He is looking for Republican votes, since so many Republicans say they are for that, and we are clearly in need of more economic stimulus. So far, anyone? Anyone? Anyone at all? Any Republicans in Congress on board with this? Anyone? Joining us now is Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell. He met with the president today about this new infrastructure proposal. Governor, thanks very much for your time.
Appreciate it, Rachel.
Now, you are living the bipartisan dream of infrastructure. You have been working with Governor Schwarzenegger, the Republican governor in California, and Mayor Bloomberg from New York City about trying to build bipartisan support for a way forward on infrastructure. It seems like it's possible when you guys do it out of the federal level, but at the federal level, it's just fallen apart. What's the difference?
Well, I think this congressional election has caused it to fall apart. It wasn't too long ago, Rachel, that Senator Jim Inhofe, certainly one of the more conservative members of the Senate, and we co-authored a piece on the need to invest in infrastructure in Politico. I think the election has soured everything, and I am hopeful, again, I'm a cockeyed optimist, but I am hopeful that after the election, regardless of the results, that we can get together and do something significant, because the need for infrastructure, the substantive need is great, but it's also the single best job producer we can have. It puts people to work on the construction sites, back in steel factories, concrete factories, asphalt factories, and it's well-paying jobs that can't be outsourced. So I think that people get it, and Republicans get it too. If we can get past this awful partisanship, maybe after the election we'll do something for the country. Again, I'm optimistic, but it could fall apart. But if it's paid for, I think we'll get some Republican support.
I am charmed by your optimism, I have to say. But I'm imagining the lame duck Congress coming back after the election, heading into much smaller Democratic majorities or maybe even Republican majorities, and this being associated with stimulus, this being associated with the Obama administration. If the president is for it, I think Republicans are going to be against it. The 2012 election sort of starts the day after 2010. I want to be as optimistic as you are, but I don't hear it.
But your piece was very good, because we can go back to them and say, hey, you guys argued for more infrastructure spending in the stimulus. And in fact, it's true. Barbara Boxer and, again, Jim Inhofe, they tried to triple the amount of infrastructure spending in the stimulus and got beaten back. So, I mean, we've got their own words. John Mica, the ranking member of Transportation in the House, he wants a significant bill. He and Jim Oberstar agree about the scope and dimension of the 6-year bill that we've got to reauthorize. I think there's hope here. If there's one area where we maybe can get off on the right foot after the election, it's infrastructure, because of its history, because of its tradition, and because, look, the unemployment news, the economic news is stark. After the election, I believe, and again, I know this sounds like I'm a naive fool, but I believe that we've got to act in the best interest of the country, and this works. This absolutely works. We can show it state by state. We can show the significant number of jobs that were produced, again, on the construction side, back in the factories. It's great for American manufacturing, and it fulfills a substantive need. You want to hear a shocking statistic, Rachel? The Army Corps of Engineers needed to spend a little under $700 million to repair the levees in New Orleans before Katrina. We didn't get the money, and now we've spent $16 billion in New Orleans, the federal government.
John Mica, he described correctly as the ranking member on the Transportation Subcommittee there, was one of the Republicans who came out today after the president's event and poo-pooed it, immediately said, no, this is never going to happen. I wonder if, because there was some infrastructure spending in the stimulus, we had about, as far as I know, about $50 billion in transportation infrastructure problems.
Transportation infrastructure.
What's that?
More than just transportation, though. There was money in water and wastewater, money for broadband, money for the electrical grid, significant infrastructure above and beyond transportation.
Yes, but even if you just look at the transportation infrastructure, about $50 billion, credited with about 14,000 projects. A lot of stuff came in under budget. Obviously, the construction sector is one of the sectors that's hit the worst on unemployment. There's a very positive story to tell about what happened with infrastructure spending in the stimulus. But what were the political lessons learned about how to make it more sustainable in Washington in order to come back and do more of it?
Well, interesting. It's got to be done more quickly, and the president and the governors and mayors discussed that today. And I pointed out to the president that we rebuilt the bridge in Minnesota, a brand new bridge, in less than a year. For me to do a current bridge in Pennsylvania, brand new, with EISs and the environmental requirements, would take about 3 years. Now, we've got to get those timelines concurrent instead of consecutive. We've got to speed up the bid process. There's so much we can do when the will is there. And I'm proud that Pennsylvania was, Congressman Oberstar ranks the states in how quickly they obligated and spent the money. We were #1 in the nation, but that's because I got my contractors together at the beginning of stimulus and said, look, this is going to put people back to work. It's going to put money in your pockets, but we've got to move. We've got to roll on this. You've got to be ready to go. I'm shortening the bid time on every single contract. There's ways to get it done if there's a will to get it done. And look, everyone agrees. Congressman Mica wants the broad 6-year bill reenacted. We need to get that done. No question about that. But in the short term, we need to get this bill passed to put Americans back to work, and back to work quickly. If we wait till February or March, we miss next year's construction cycle. In construction, particularly in the northern half of the country, you can only construct from late March to late November. If we wait till next year, we miss that crucial construction cycle. The last 2 construction cycles, the economy's been fueled by stimulus spending. If we don't have it next year, if we don't have this extra spending, we will get really hurt. There's 20% unemployment in the construction industry right now. It's a critical need for the country, and Lord knows we got to do something bipartisan.
Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell, both optimistic and somehow responsible for the Phillies wrapping it up last night, so your schedule was clear to talk to us. Good luck to you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.